Today we are here to discuss the role of peace, but particularly with the ongoing conflicts that have been happening across East Africa, and where do we fit in as young people. And of course, this is Youth of Purpose that happens every Wednesday at 9 p.m. and with me, Tracy Lynn, your host. I'm not alone in studios as usual. I have a very interesting panel of two gentlemen and one lady, and I would allow them to introduce themselves, starting it off from my immediate left.
Good evening. My name is Isaac Mbabazi. A scholar of governance and international relations, and also a student of law. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mbabazi, for joining us. Next to Mbabazi is Blesius. Blesius, please, if you can introduce yourself to our viewers.
Good evening, Uganda. My name is Namirembe Blesius. I'm a teacher by profession, biology, physical education. I'm the CEO of Ujuzi Initiative. This is an initiative that looks at skilling the young people, mindset change, critical thinking, and gender empowerment. I'm also an aspirant for Western Youth MP, and I look forward to the show.
Thank you so much. We are humbled to have you join our conversation. And of course, next to Blesius is Drake. Drake, kindly introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you very much, Treslin. First of all, good evening to our viewers. Thank you very much for having me here today. I know very many young people on the other end will be wondering, today Drake is, is
yes,
a panelist. But
yes.
Of course, these are issues that, for me, in my opinion, when it comes to conversations relating to peace and security, but also integration, is one that is very keen to my heart, and I'm very happy to be here. My name is Douglas Drake, Human Rights Officer at the Center for Constitutional Governance. Looking forward to an interesting conversation. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Drake, for joining us. I also feel, I feel exactly what you just said, because I'm also used of that. Talking about peace and involvement of young people, very many people usually say that youth, much as they can be agents of peace, on the other hand, they've been used to be on the front line of conflict and violence. And of course, when you look at the UN Resolution on Peace and Security, Resolution 2250, on the aspect of saying, now let's have young people be part of these conversations. And of course, in 2015, now we have them saying, young people can also be part of these conversations, where we can have policies, where we can have laws, where we can have bodies that actually do frontline or spearhead peace. And of course, even within Uganda itself, Vision 2040 does highlight the role that peace plays towards socio-economic transformation. And even when you get to the East African community, or even the Vision 2050 of the East African community. To start it off with you, Drake, a preamble on the status quo in terms of conflict as it is across the region, but also the involvement of young people within the conflict.
All right. Thank you very much, Treslin. First and foremost, I would like to make this statement. You see, in Africa, power is grabbed by the gun and it's sold by a handshake.
Yes.
And this is going to be, I'm going to back up this statement with the submission that I'm going to make. Firstly, 40% of the wars and armed conflict that is happening in the world is happening in the continent. 40% of the 100% of the conflicts happening in the world is happening in the African continent. And the most unfortunate part of that is that for at least more than 50 armed conflicts across the African continent, 45% of that has risen ever since 2020. But the question is, why is Africa at the moment a critical hotspot for these conflicts? I think this primarily has two strongholds to it. One, the fact that the African continent is the youngest and has the youngest population with a median age of 19.3. But two, the question relating to resources. So that responds to the question, why is Africa, a hotspot to this conflict? One, the young population that of course is used oftentimes bought into the ideas of these armed groups. But then two, the idea relating to the fact of resources. But why is it that young people are either the victims or perpetrators of violence? You understand that in the African continent, across the continent, young people are experiencing poverty and unemployment. Those are two key factors that are driving young people oftentimes buy into ideologies that make them or prompt them to participate in violence. Let me give you an example. In Nigeria, where you have the likes of the Islamic extremist groups that, of course, absorbing very many young people into these armed groups to participate, because oftentimes these young people are poor and they do not have work to do. So because these young populations in countries like Nigeria, then we shall also now get to Sudan later on, they are poor and they're unemployed, oftentimes buy into these ideologies and oftentimes propagate the violence and propagate the atrocities that we're seeing happening across the country. But the question is, what is the effect of all of this? You see, the wars that are happening in the continent right now has a very huge humanitarian cost. So I've just given you an account to the majority of the armed conflict happening across the world. 40% of it is in the African continent. But besides that, ever since 2020, there has been an increase in the number of armed groups and wars happening across the continent. But most interestingly, and I think which is going to be the center of our discussion today, is the Sudan question. And I think that is something that I'm looking forward to underpin. But most importantly, the role that young people are playing in influencing these roles. I've just shown you that the idea relating to them being poor, our young people being unemployed, oftentimes are absorbed in these armed conflicts because they do not have options, and the only option they have is to join these armed conflicts because they sell to them that ideology and they buy into it and end up propagating and pushing violence. So I'm looking forward to having that interesting conversation, but just giving me justification why we are having young people involved in armed conflict. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Drake. And also I like the fact that you bring in the statistics and how it is currently within the region, but also within Africa. Blessius, when you look at the effect that conflict has, particularly on women, and I say this because you well know, running around, some of them are expectant mothers, some of them have children to look after, but also some of them are really struggling to make, even to earn something. And also the UN Peace and Security Council decides to pass a resolution, that was in 2000, in regards to having women actually being champions or being part of the questions or being put at the decision-making tables. But also looking at the armed conflict that and its influence on the women. From your perspective, especially as a young woman who has maybe lived in the experience or maybe had stories, or in whichever way that you've really been able to gather information, what is the status like for conflict in terms of women?
Thank you, Madam Tresleen, my sister. Concerning conflict towards women and what is happening in our continent, it is so sad, and of course it still rotates on how best. I don't want to really look much on the side of the impact, because we all know it very well that conflicts affect women in a way that these are mothers, some are pregnant mothers, some have young children, some are going through a lot. Now, when you look at that situation and you look at the women, then it is even worse compared to the other gender, but it all affects all of us. And I want to approach it in a way that this is something that affects all of us, and of course, it is something that we would not wish to happen in our country. Yes. Uganda in particular. I'm looking at the area of Uganda. Yes, the neighboring countries are affected, but when you look at what is happening concerning the area of politics, campaigns, personally, I'm in the campaign season. When you see even in our own country what is in, then somehow you wouldn't say that it is far from us. It is not far from us, but still women can play a role in solving the conflicts. We have a big role to play. We are peace builders from our homes. And if we take part to look into it, not only on the line of the leaders, the politicians, then it is going to be solved. Now, when it comes to women, I've seen a number of times when women have always been on the front line of solving conflicts. And you can agree with me that where a lady is and have chosen to create peace, peace will be prevailed. So I would like to request each one of us, especially those who are watching us, that this is a matter that we need to look at and get ways on how we can shield our country so that we do not be the victims and also end up becoming like what is happening to our neighboring countries like Sudan and what was happening in Tanzania the recent days. I thank you.
Interesting. Mbabazi, briefly again, your context and understanding, especially from the aspect of being a legal scholar, in terms of how you think conflict has impacted on the young people, generally of East Africa, but also maybe abroad Africa.
Thank you so much, Celine, and thank you the people who are watching. I'll just kick it off. Drake did it too much justice. I don't have much to build onto, but just to a little bit of flesh on what Drake said. I think he built his stand on 2 points, unemployment and very many other points. But for me, it's more of the lack of ideological clarity on this young continent. I mean, the continent, in terms of self-governance, is less than 100 years old, and we are just walking out of our Baba wa Taifa stage, where the fathers of our independence are just dying off, most of them, or have been out of power for the last 10, 15 years. For most of them, I mean, Jobo and Nyerere, they've not been away for more than 30 years. And we failed to have that clean transition, and we failed to have leaders who understand that youth. First of all, the problem they're dealing with is something they've never had on their hands. They've never had to deal with youth. The president here has never had to deal with youth. The president in Tanzania, Her Excellency Samia, these are new problems. They've not had to deal with the internet and all these things. So they're dealing with new problems, and with new things arise new problems, especially in terms of conflict. We have social media, and it is such a potent force in both the creation of conflict and in the de-escalation of conflict. And like my brother Drake earlier introduced the Sudan issue, I mean, we all know about it because of social media. It has played a major role. But also in regard to the Tanzanian question, social media has done both good and bad, because we see it escalating the situation out of hand and also de-escalating it, also helping us know, and also creating a potent East African force in terms of the regional balance. It creates Ugandan activists who are talking about it, Kenyans, I think, Tanzanians, everyone was aware and they were talking about it in a way. And for me, that's my angle about it. The demographics, the kids, the lack of ideological clarity, the lack of our leaders involving the youth, because for them it is more about ruling these people, but it should be a question of legitimacy, not a form of governance. So if they lack the legitimacy to govern their own people, regardless of the form of governance they take on, it becomes problematic, and we can only buy more time, but we will have conflict, pull over and pile over as several as it can come. Thank you.
Interesting. And to get it back to you, Drake, especially that understanding the role that peace has to play, if we have to have economic, if we have to have financial, but also all the other independence that we always yearn for. From a background that we are talking about sustainable development goals, and 16 is saying let's have good governance where peace and security actually does prevail. Digging into a few samples, the DRC question, the Sudani question, what is your say?
First and foremost, we shall not be able to achieve the economic powerhouse that we intend to be as Africa if we have conflict existing. Secondly, we shall also not be in position to achieve the sustainable development goals that we are preaching if there is conflict in the region. Let's start with, first of all, what's happening in Sudan. In the last 10 days alone, 69,000 people have been reported dead. To give you context to that, 69,000, if we were to equate it to the numbers of people that have died in Gaza, it has taken approximately close to 3 years for the Israeli-Gaza war to happen, that to equate the lives lost. So if in Sudan alone in the last 10 days, 69,000 people have died, those are the lives that have been lost in Gaza in the last 2 to 3 years. Now, that is the brevity of the issue in Sudan. And if we as young people do not articulate and talk about these issues, we stand at risk of seeing an entire humanity being wiped out. Why is it therefore very important that we as young people get involved in the conversation? He mentioned something very important, ideological clarity. But I think we cannot be in position to achieve ideological clarity amidst the overriding poverty in the region, but above all, the unemployment. But all this comes to one thing. Our continent, as rightly put it, the post-independent Africa is barely 100 years old. And it being barely 100 years old, it means, first of all, when it comes to our education systems across the continent, majority of us also do not understand and appreciate our history. And that means us not understanding our history, we lack, first of all, the ideological understanding of what happened in the past to help us justify the actions that are happening today. That is why it's easy to buy young people into a particular idea to go ahead and propagate violence. So for us to say that for us as a generation to continuously keep quiet and see a genocide happening to our neighboring country in Sudan, I think it's despicable. And first of all, and it's not only despicable, but it's also, it's even hard to put language to it, because it's out of this world. You see, if you see the stains of blood, if you can see stains of blood from space, what does this speak? Like, there is a huge genocide happening. But coming back to your question in terms of economic integration, regional integration, for us, as I said, for us to achieve the economic integration we need to first achieve peace. Because you need to have a peaceful country for people to freely move, for labor to freely move, for goods to freely move. But let's first underscore the question relating to economic integration. The history of economic integration dates back in terms of of pre-colonial and independent Africa. Let's start with the Organization for African Union, the OAU, that later on, of course, was followed by the African Union. They established an entity called the African Economic Community. The African Economic Community is charged with the mandate of achieving economic integration across the continent. And to achieve this mandate, they of course went ahead and established the Economic Community for Africa. And this dates Africa in 4 different blocks. You have the COMESA, which is the common market for East and Southern Southern markets. You have the ECOWAS for the West African countries. You have the Economic Community for Central African states. Then you have the Arab Maghreb Union that represents North Africa. Now, those are the blocks that have been established to achieve economic integration. But the question is, strictly, shall we achieve those economic integrations that we want? The free movement of labor, the free movement of goods, the free movement of custom unions, an integrated or single currency. Is this achievable if we have the continent in flames? Is it really achievable? If Sudan is in flames, if Somalia is in flames, if DRC is in flames, recently we saw what happened in Tanzania. Is it achievable? So the question is, we as a critical demographic in young people, who are supposed to, first of all, help the African Union achieve the Agenda 2063, which, by the way, many of us young people are so disconnected even with Agenda 2063. So for us to go ahead and say that we shall achieve Economic integration as a continent is laughable. If our neighbor in Sudan is crying and the international community is quiet, how many African countries have come out to condemn what is happening in Sudan? How many? How many young people in our generation are actually interested to talk about what's happening in Sudan? Are people even following what's happening in Sudan? Like, if you're to appreciate the history of the war that is happening in Sudan and to juxtapose it with economic integration, it will be extremely unimaginable if we fail also to understand the history. I can go ahead and give all the history, but I know I don't have that time. But for us, the Ugandan youth, we need to know that the Sudan question can also happen to us.
Yes.
Because the Janjaweed militia, which is now the RSF, that is the Rapid Support Forces, was of course, they call it as a rebel group, it was a militia that was formed by the then president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, to help conquer the civil war that was happening in Sudan. Of course, all of us, the history has it that this RSF committed the Darfur genocide that happened in 2003. In Uganda here, if you're to just juxtapose RSF, in Uganda here, don't we have an armpit that protects the president? We do. Besides that, there's another profile to that conflict relating to the ethnic profile. You find the Arab Muslim, they're killing the black Muslims. The ethnic question is very critical. It could as well happen to Uganda. So we as Ugandan youth who are supposed to be proponents of peace need to be in position to understand and underpin all these questions to prevent what's happening in Sudan, but also condemn what's happening in Sudan so that we don't have a repeat in this country. For us to achieve that economic integration that we want as a continent, but also as East Africa, we need peace in the region. Thank you.
Wow. Interesting. Thank you for that. Well stated and explained. I feel I have nothing much to add to it. But to get to you, Blesias, the East African community has what we call the East African Community Youth Peace and Security Platform. And part of the reasons as to why this has been created is to have an avenue where we front such discussions, but also make sure that questions of peace and conflict do not just go as hearsay. Issues around evidence of what is happening, issues around, particularly now for the electoral processes, and the influence of election violence in terms of what we intend to achieve towards peace. If you look at what was happening in Tanzania in the election period, and of course it does happen, or it has happened to Uganda some time back, or it is even happening, much as maybe it may not be to the gravity as it is or as it happened in Tanzania. Talking about the role of young people in promoting peace amidst elections, where do we stand and what is our role?
Thank you. Of course, the youth, we play a very big role, being the majority, occupying over the 70% in our country. We play a big role. And when you see even in our neighboring countries, the youth, we are the majority. And this one shows you clearly that if these youth are not occupied very well, they are not planned for very well by the government, at the end of the day, they might be peace builders or they might be the leaders of the conflicts. And this one comes in on the area, the fact that we see many of our friends, many of our fellows unemployed, especially here in Uganda. I have a number of my colleagues who are unemployed. You find someone spending over 2 years without working, and not because they are not brilliant, but because the conditions are so harsh, and of course the system somehow is not allowing them thrive. Those who put up their small businesses, at the end of the day, they are taxed. So we have social media at hand. Of course, you don't expect that person to just be free. At the end of the day, they carry all their time on social media. And this social media time is always, sometimes they get exposed to things that make them even become violent. I would like to say that it is our role as the young people, and of course we can be peace builders by making sure that it's our time and our role to protect this country, especially in this period. I saw this in 2021 when many of us were in the front lines of our different presidents campaigning seriously, and at the end of the day some were put in prisons because they were found violent. So to me, I'm really calling out everyone out there, especially the young people, that it is our role to protect this country, and it begins with me and you to know that this is not the way to solve issues. We can handle issues in a very systematic way. We can have dialogues like today we are here discussing on how best we can have peace in our different countries. We can always also advocate for peace on our different social media platforms, and we should look out for those very people who are trying to push violence in terms of campaigning, because I've come to realize that some candidates are using our problems as a way of campaigning among us, and at the end of the day they build violence in our hearts, they create hate towards our country. But this comes back to us, because if we fight and destroy whatever we have now, we shall not like the Uganda we are in now. So it is our role that even in this campaign time, whoever candidate you're campaigning for, please make sure that you are the peace builder. Do not wait for anyone to push you into violence. Make sure that you're a peace builder, and let's take part in making sure that we protect our country, so that what is happening in the neighboring countries should not be on our own.
Interesting, Blasius. Maybe just in 1 minute, in regards to election violence, what do you think should be done, particularly by the ESC?
Of course, there are many things it is supposed to do, many, but many times we have been disappointed with the Electoral Commission, and sometimes we feel that even if we tell them what to do, they might not do it for us, because already we see what is happening. The youth are being put on the front line in the names of coming to campaign. They give them more money, but the role of the Electoral Commission, of course, they are supposed to give guidelines to make sure that they stop commercialization of politics, because all this violence rotate around that, and if they can really help us on that, I believe that we shall have peace in this country.
Thank you so much. To get back to you, Mbabazi, especially in terms of the role that the global geopolitics does play in the struggle for peace and security within African continents. If you could shed light on that.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That's such an ambiguous question, but I'll start off. The geopolitics have been always a central force. I mean, from the Congo to Sudan, that Drake is so passionate about, to what was happening in Tanzania, funded by, dubious people, and if you do a little
Excuse
bit of
me,
background.
I think you should also be passionate about it in Babas. I think
Maybe
he's
speaking a different area of passion.
I mean, I am very passionate about it, but again, the geopolitics play into that. I mean, we have the UN Security Council. We have a standby barracks of the United States in Kenya. We have a standby barracks in Djibouti. We have the East African force that we manage through Ghana and push to the DRC. Now, if all these players are quiet, then there is a problem. We are used to the savior syndrome, that aspect that a white man will come through. I mean, also, the downfall of Omar al-Bashir did not happen in a vacuum. There were forces at play, and the forces at play, everyone is silent because they are like, you created this problem, you should solve it. And the African youth you're talking about are a little bit indifferent to this pain because, of course, they've taught us to think through tribal lenses, ethnic lenses, religious lenses, color lenses, and all these other things. So, but to bring it back to East Africa, Central proper, the geopolitical players have played, like, I mean, there's a whole background on KAS, CAS, I'm certain Drake knows that, and how it has been funding Chadema, and how, I mean, the Chadema leader, Mr. Honorable Lisu, backed down, and then he pushed for violence as a method. I mean, we have opposition candidates who have arrived at a place where they think that the incumbents will not be pushed over through what we call democratic means, and we need external players, or external players are already interrupting with our own politics. I mean, you hear the president here in Uganda with the rhetoric of, external players. You saw him make a statement about the oil, but the geopolitical aspect of it is that Uganda has oil, and the heartbeat of East Africa is unity. Now the problem is, if anyone is to tackle that, they have to deal with their economic growth. Now, if they sabotage Ugandan oil, obviously, I mean, Kenya is a colonial settler country. We all know that it is a base for the white people, the white race. So it leaves the question to Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And Uganda has the propensity and the ability to become an economic powerhouse in the next 10 to 5 years if it deals with the oil in the best of manners, not in the corrupt ways it has always been known to do so, and if it deals with the gold. So the geopolitical players, in our own assessment, is that they want to sabotage that growth, and to sabotage that, they go to the exit point, and that is Tanzania, and sabotage the oil, and eventually by that they sabotage the entire plan of an East African Federation, because it is wishful thinking for anyone to think that we can coalesce into a single unit if we do not have an economic powerhouse among us. So the Tanzanian economy and Kenyan economy are better than the Ugandan economy, but they are not so strong and strong enough to sustain us through it all. So in my own reading and assessment of the president's plan, it looks like he's intending to build Uganda as East Africa's biggest powerhouse economically, so that it is easier for others, because they have better currencies, to fall in. And for any geopolitical player to sabotage that and keep the minerals and resources going, you have to fund a few house Negroes, right, left, and center, to sabotage that, which takes me back to the problem of ideological clarity. The leaders have created a classist system where they think it is only the army and a particular group of people who understand these things, and they keep neglecting the youth. And they forget that these people are going to become problematic, because for as long as the youth do not know the enemy within and the enemy without, the federation, the peace that Drake talks about, the Sudan war, it is all a farce, because the RSF is murdering out of fear. I'm certain Drake is a scholar of the French Revolution. He knows that the reign of terror was crystallized by a few factors, and one of the factors is that internally, when people feel threatened by external forces, they turn suicidal, and that is what is happening in Sudan. The RSF feels threatened and it has turned suicidal, and that is what happens over and over again. So if we can solve that as leaders, if the AU can, if the AU can do something about it, it would be such a nice thing. If the president of East Africa can do something about it, because we've done it before in the Congo, I'm certain it would save a lot of lives. Thank you so much.
Wow, you did give quite a very interesting context. Much as you had highlighted, the question was ambiguous, but I think it captured almost everything that we needed to listen to, and we appreciate you for that. Getting back to you, Drake, we do have the NIMD, Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy in Uganda, has been struggling or trying to put out or fronting elections that are peaceful through its campaign of Let's Talk Peace. it's not just even the NIMD. We have the African Center for Constructive Resolution on Conflict and Disputes, which is ACCORD. But we also have African Union having structures and trying to do sort of trainings on conflict resolution and also peace building. A call to action. In your perspective, who should we reach out to in terms of making sure that peace actually is, or peace is achieved? Who do we reach out to? Who are the stakeholders who should be part of these conversations and the recommendations that you would give?
Your question has a couple of layers. Let me start with the first layer, which is to do with electoral violence vis-a-vis peace. I will stick with Uganda as an example. Our history has it that the first electoral malpractice in this country happened in 1954. And for people who read, you definitely understand that this happened at a point whereby the British was giving, went ahead and was giving a leeway for a representation in the Legislative Assembly. And names that were mentioned were names like Ike Musazi, who is the grandfather of independence in this country. But because Ike Musazi had a huge force, because he had a huge following, and his following for independence in this country had a huge force, the British were against the idea of another rise of a Nkrumah in Uganda. That is why they had to sideline him and push for someone else. So when pushing for someone else, Ike Musazi called upon his deputy to run because they had denied him to run. The night before the election, the deputy of Ike Musazi was whisked away by the British. That's the first time electoral malpractice happened in this country. And when that happened, that led to an uproar against the supporters of the Uganda National Congress. Of course, you know, for our constitutional history, Ike Musazi was very critical in pushing for independence. The reason as to why I'm bringing out this information is, you see, for the scholars of peace and security know that for there to be conflict, there is what they call the political theory that relates to the urge to have power and to get power. So that is a ground for conflict to ensue. Now, we are headed towards 2026. We have seen various facets of violence happening. Over the weekend, we saw what happened to the young ladies as they headed to Mbarara. Facets of violence. But also our history has it captured. We saw what happened on November 18th, the killings that happened on the streets of Kampala. And the people, the victims of this electoral violence are oftentimes young people. We're always at the center of this violence. So in relation to electoral violence vis-a-vis peace, the proponents of peace in this country, the first stakeholders, which bring me to the second layer of the question, the first stakeholders are the citizens themselves. But in the citizens, I would call upon the young people. Because we have thrown the statistics time and again that we are the majority when it comes to numbers. But in us being the majority also means our numbers, with our numbers comes with certain vulnerabilities in its own self. So my call, first of all, is to the young people to, of course, have a peaceful and go and participate, vote, carry out your right, but do so peacefully. But also in the urge of demanding for change that we want, I think we need to do so amicably, which now also makes me make a clarion call to our fellow young people to read. My brother mentioned that we have young people absorbed in armed groups or to join conflict because they lack ideological clarity. Let's put this in the context of most of our political parties. How many young people are ideologically clear or have an ideological underpinning of their political parties that they side with? Or they're just following someone who said, come and ride with me. We have very many young people who at the moment are just victims of such. You have no clue of the person you're standing behind, and oftentimes they use you to propagate their agenda, and oftentimes you end up a victim or a perpetrator of violence. So let us, first of all, appreciate these concepts and know that for us to have peace, we need to know where we're from and where we want to be. But then, my call to the international community. I will start first and foremost. Someone made mention and said in the 21st century, the UN that is supposed to, of course, be an advocate and a proponent and the principle of peace has failed on its role and mandate. We saw that in 1994 when they took time to even pronounce itself in the genocide that happened in Rwanda in 1994. They took time in pronouncing the genocide that happened in Bosnia. Now they're also taking time in pronouncing themselves in the genocide that is happening right now in Sudan. So my call, first of all, is where's the UN? 2, African Union. This is the time you're supposed to see the AU speak up. You have an Agenda 2063. We are talking about economic integration. When you came up with the African Economic Community, your agenda was to have an economic integrated Africa by 2025, and they are 2025. Have we achieved so? Or these are just leaflets that we go and speak up in conference rooms, time passes by, and we come back and say, okay, we push the time forward. So my call is to the AU. 1, pronounce yourself on the atrocities that is happening in Sudan. I know that very many, there are very many factors that is hindering them, but that mandate is to see that there is unity in the continent. Union stands for unity. That's why we have African Union. For us to be united, for us to be integrated, we need to have peace in the region. That means we need peace in Sudan, we need peace in DRC, we need peace in Somalia, we need peace everywhere across the continent. Lastly, my call is to the Ugandan government. Even as we edge towards the 2026 general elections, let us try our level best to propel some ounce of understanding towards the younger generation. Yes, I understand there is a feeling of young people wanting change, and because of that, oftentimes they will use some sort of force. We should understand that that feeling is there, but let us understand why that feeling is there and pronounce ourselves from using a lot of force towards 2026 general elections. Otherwise, my call is personally, I think as young people, that we need to read Tracy. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
We have been toyed so much because of our ignorance as young people. The older generation will laugh at us and say, "What do you know as a young person?" Because anyway, you can't even make a statement and justify yourself.
Yeah.
So lastly, from me to all the young people out there, let's read and let us engage objectively. If someone has an opinion that you don't agree with, don't get emotions. Disagree respectfully and objectively, and we'll come to a consensus. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Drake, for that. Blessius, your call to action and the stakeholders you want to reach out to.
Thank you so much. I clearly speak to my fellow young people that it is our mission to stand and defend this country. Even before we look at the government, we can really protect this nation by between me and you, and of course are looking at how best we are not receiving bad information from the people who are influencing us, especially the outsiders, people who have different agendas, that before you rally that person behind, do you know what they believe in? Do you know what they are pushing? Do you know what is their agenda? And before you get involved in any move, find out what is exactly the outcome. Because many other times when I've seen our colleagues go on the streets and at the end of the day, even what they are advocating for, they do not achieve it. So to me, I'm saying that let's devise other means. We have our social media handles. Let's put out flyers, campaign posters, anything that can advocate for peace, so that in this period we can protect our country against any form of violence. I know it cannot fail to come out because we have different candidates. This one is supporting the other, this one is supporting this, but let's know that we are all Ugandans, and it is high time to keep, regardless of our different political parties, regardless of the candidates you're supporting, it is really important to know that this country belongs to us and it's our role to protect it. I would like to continue and add my voice and call on the youth, especially in the Western region, that Blesius is here. Voro has been a leader who advocates for peace. Voro is a leader who has never even engaged myself in any form of violence. I'm a leader who has always looked out for dialogues and to make sure that whatever we are to do, it involves dialogue. Yeah. So I really request for your support. Please vote for me, and surely we shall have a better Uganda in the next 5 years to come.
Thank you so much, Blesius, for that insight. Mbabazi, your call to action and the stakeholders that you think we can involve.
Thank you so much, Traceline. I don't have many people to call to apart from the citizens. This is your own country. Your leaders won't come to save you. The UN has failed you. The African Union is just a rubber stamp. You are out of time. It is incumbent upon you to fight for what you think you need and deserve, to fight for human dignity, and that should be the bottom line of what every human should get. And in the same manner about conflict resolution, you can only resolve conflict if you are ideologically clear, if you can separate what is best for you from what is not best for you. And if you fail at that level, I think going to the ballots, like Uganda is going to on January the 15th. Please, it's all right, it's well within your rights. Please, if you do not know what you're participating in, it's all right to stay at home. No one will kill you, no one will shoot you, and it will help us, because for as long as, like Drake has said, for as long as you're a puppet, for as long as you're a pawn, for as long as you do not know what you stand for, you will fall for everything, and that is what perpetrates and fosters and creates the incubation room and space for violence. And to the police force, I only request you that the people or the brothers or the other side of the divide are only, in your judgment, not in mine, ideologically different. They are not enemies. It is just an ideological difference. So wherever and whenever you can, the basic and minimum that is expected from you is to treat them with dignity. I mean, legally, a touch is enough to effect an arrest. You do not need to undress young ladies. It ashames and embarrasses us as a nation, especially for the mothers of the nation. And for the youth, my call to action for you is, like Drake has said, read, 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 read. Understand the enemy, that the enemy is not your fellow Africans, the enemy is not your fellow people, but it is our ignorance, it is the people who are willing to steal and take as much as they can from us as we squabble and fight. And also, in closing, democracy is not an organic method for us. It is not something we understand because it was based on things we do not understand. So the thought that it is what will help us all should be based on what Drake said, your ability to read and understand it as a machine and as a system. For as long as you do not understand it, you do not even know where it came from, you do not know the masters who have perfected it over time, please desist from it, because it is not in your best interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mbabazi, for those interesting remarks. Thank you so much, Blesius, for the call to action, and of course thank you so much, Drake, for joining us and also for adding your break to this conversation. We've been discussing the role of young people in East Africa, especially in terms of being peace builders, but also making sure that they are champions of peace and also not the ones that front conflict. And of course, from the take home is that young people, which has been stretched far by two people, is you must read. Read to understand the context, read to understand the status quo, and read to know where you can fit in and how you can be part of the solution. Sometimes, like they have highlighted, is the enemy is not Africa, the enemy is our ignorance. So part of what I've also been able to take on is to make sure that I always read. But also a call to action is that there should not be hope lost. We still believe that as young people, we are the key stakeholders to ensure that we are not the promoters of conflict, but rather we are on the other end that does promote peace and also ensures that there is no conflict. And of course, lastly, is that this show does happen every Wednesday at 9 p.m. here at U24 television, and it is me, Tracy Linda, that's host the conversation. Thank you so much to the team on the production that makes it happen, and thank you so much to our guests that have taken time to come and contribute to the conversation. In case you missed, remember the show runs even on YouTube. You can be able to listen in even after this. Thank you so much. See you next time, same place.
Youth of Purpose.